Greetings, Sand family and community. My name is Katie Gray, and I'm here with the online summit where we're talking about wisdom in times of crisis. This is a brand new experience for us, having these online interviews. And what's so remarkable is that we get to have people from all over the world bring their wisdom and their insights and their tools to help guide us and bring us forward in this time. And I'm very excited to bring Susan Campbell to the conversation. She is when you start to research Susan Campbell, your eyes open big. She is a veteran of understanding trauma and the heart and fear and love. She works with relationships. She's a relationship therapist. She's written 11 books. Profound. I'm trying to write one book, and she's written 11 books. And she leads workshops, and she's a speaker, and she has a way of cutting to the point, taking us fearlessly to the heart of what needs to be spoken about in such a culture that is avoiding what needs to be spoken about. Susan, welcome.
Thanks, Katie.
Thank you so much for being here. I just adore you, and I've been just learning about you, and I feel so honored to be the one to be leading your interview today. What I love about what you brought forward in your blurb about what you feel like you could contribute to the conversation to strengthen people right now is bringing up the fact that we are an avoidance culture. We are, we've been through so much trauma. Everyone has experienced trauma. You and I had a phone call, and you were remarking how trauma is hidden. Trauma can be, the sound of a voice. Trauma can be anything. And to not underestimate trauma in our lives, when you think of it that way, everyone has been through it. And you combine that with the fact that our culture is encouraging us to not look at the truth, to not face our fears, to distract ourselves, to put a pacifier in and find a new Netflix series, to do anything we can to not be with what's coming up for us right now. And while it's a different experience for everyone, I think there probably is some realm of uncertainty, whether it's financial uncertainty or it's, not knowing if your relationship is going to survive. I think of all of the couples having to be with one another right now in a confined space. And I think of you. I think, what would Susan say? What would you tell people that are in a confined space? How do we break through the ice when we're looking at a bigger collective problem of an avoidance culture, an avoidance world? Mm-hmm. How do we not avoid what's happening right now?
Well, let's start with some empathy and self-compassion for what humanity's having to deal with right now. Because there are many intersecting crises happening all at once, and in a way this can be overwhelming to the human psyche and to the collective ability to trust ourselves to solve the problems. So when we mention trauma and we think about individual developmental trauma, like the things that may have happened to each of us when we were trying to grow up into healthy little people, we needed comfort and like somebody to hold space for us when we were frightened or when there was too much coming at us. And I think a lot of us had to deal with it alone. See, this is, when I say an avoidant culture, we live in an avoidant culture, that's language from attachment theory. And an avoidant family, and we're like this one human dysfunctional family here, that's quickly trying to get from A to B, get the job done. We haven't got time for the pain. And so think of a parent, and you've got a job, you've got a couple of kids, you've got a partner, you've got a house to keep, and your baby's crying, and that's not convenient. Okay, and this happened no matter when you were born. Parents have incredible pressures on them, and they can't meet all the attention needs of the little child. So we're kind of left on our own. And what we learned almost all of us, because if you think of it, and I'm talking the whole globe now, not just the US, we all started out little and helpless in a world of big people, and we depended on these big people for our very survival. And we became very, very attuned to what was okay and not okay with the big people. And so often we were in pain, or we were afraid, or we were hungry, or we just needed something, and our needs were a bit of a nuisance at times to this parent who's just trying to get her job done. And so as a little one, being attuned to that, I begin to get the message, if I'm in pain, or if I'm upset, or if I'm emotional, that means there's something wrong with me, because I get the vibe from the parent that they're frustrated, they don't know what to do, or they put a pacifier in my mouth, or they hand me a toy, or they say, oh, don't worry about it, those kids don't know what they're talking about, or just something that's quite different from this gesture. Oh, come here, little one, let me be with you. Cry if you need to cry, and I'll show you that your emotions are not overwhelming, because I'm here to be with you in this. So if we didn't get that then, we may need to give it to ourselves now. And maybe we can use some of this overwhelm that some of us are feeling, or the conflicts in our couple relationships or our families, to pause and feel whatever that is. Because the practices that I try to have people learn as an ongoing life practice, not just do it once or twice, is whenever your adult life throws you something that has you feeling alone, abandoned, unable to cope, and with all these different crises right now, there's so much of that. Or today I was talking to somebody, and the way the crisis was triggering her early emotions was a kind of in-group, out-group. She grew up Mexican-American in a culture where she was the minority culture. And a lot of what's going on now, which is very painful for me to see, is how we're not working together to solve this crisis. We're not really, some of us hope that maybe humanity can get a sense that this is a human crisis and we have a human problem to solve. I mean, the ecological crisis we thought might do that, might give us a sense of, oh, we're all dealing with this together. How can we do it? But what's happening now is the same thing that's happening in the ecological crisis, is there's a lot of polarization. There's people saying, well, your state didn't do it right, or which country's doing better, rather than what can we learn from each other. So, that whole we attitude cannot really develop until we're able to handle the fears of something that's actually other in our own selves. We have disowned the hurting, painful part of us because we don't want to look, like a nuisance to my mom, would be what it boiled down to. I had some neglect in my early history, and I could still feel it in my adult life. When someone moves away from me, it's like, oh, I'm going to be alone. I'm going to have to handle this alone. So the practices that I teach have to do with just noticing whatever your reaction is that's coming up, whether it's a family crisis with your mate, or looking at the news and saying that politician or that state is stupid, uninformed, or we use worse labels than that. When we get triggered like that, because if you're pointing the finger at somebody, or if you're saying, oh, this shouldn't be this way, that kind of self-talk indicates to me time to pause, feel what I'm feeling underneath those stories, because you'll never solve the problem at the level of mental shoulds. You know, it has to come back to, what am I experiencing now? What do I need to experience more fully? And if I'm afraid of pain, I'm not going to be able to learn from my experience, because I'm going to shut so much of reality out. And that's possibly why we're in some of these crises right now, is we have not been developed enough as a species to see, oh, there's early warning signs, especially the ecological crisis. That's the obvious one. We've seen the handwriting on the wall for that, and now so many species are extinct and so forth. So, whew,
Yeah.
I feel the bigness of all of this, and I want us to realize that all these intersecting crises really do present an overwhelming problem that overwhelms the human nervous system and the human problem-solving capacity. And what this is signaling, I was going to say the only way out. I'm not sure there's a way out, but there's a way toward development. I think all we can expect is that when we see crises that we're not able to handle, that's a signal that we need more human development. We need to expand our capacity to experience life as it is, to read the feedback. That's the handwriting on the wall. Look at the consequences. And slowly, maybe we can develop a little more of our capacity to just deal with reality rather than spending so much time in who should be doing what, who's to blame. That whole level, and this comes up in couples counseling as well as looking at the whole culture, that should, or judging this person or that person, that simply says to me that there's a whole strata of your own human experience that you're avoiding or denying, and you're just looking at something that doesn't really exist. Shoulds are just shoulds. How are you going to solve a problem on the level of who should be doing what? So it brings us back to, what are the new human capacities that we humans need to develop? And one is just the ability to experience what is without pointing the finger, but just going, okay, my heart's beating fast. I notice I'm having judgmental thoughts, because to experience what is, you do actually have to have a bit of the witness going on. If you're totally caught in your experience, you're going to be on automatic. So I said two things in my little write-up that I sent to Sand. One is that we're so afraid of emotional pain that we cannot learn from experience. And the tool for learning to deal with emotional pain is to be able to admit that it's there. Not feel shame when you get triggered or upset, or that you are in pain or feel alone, that sort of thing. And then have some actual practices. So for me, the first practice is pause. Notice what's going on in your nervous system. And this is what I teach couples when they start yelling at each other and, who's right, accusing, that sort of thing. Wait a minute, that means you're triggered. So begin to notice all the early warning signs that you're triggered. Sometimes they're body sensations like agitation, or the fear of being abandoned, rejected, controlled, criticized, judged. Having a little language for these fears helps a lot. I do a favorite fears inventory in audiences with people that I talk to, and I'll say, well, how many people have a fear of criticized, a fear of being abandoned, fear of being controlled? And people are really able to admit these things now. When I first started this, they really weren't. I started this kind of thing 55 years ago. So I was kind of born into a personal growth family. We used to read self-help books. My parents did when I was in high school. So, I became very interested in psychology very early on and really started doing this work. So, I have seen development in our ability to admit that we have fears. So that's a really good thing. And then once we can notice the early warning signs that I'm in a triggered state, which actually means nothing good will come of what's going to come out of my mouth right now, because I'm on automatic. I'm in some kind of pain avoidance, because that's one of the things that I said in the write-up is the addiction to control and pain avoidance are two things that get in the way of humans being able to experience what is in the present moment, drop in to what's really going on, which is often simply a fear of something that maybe happened in your past. It's starting to happen again. That person, those people said something about my people. I mean, that was the conversation this morning with this client. Those people criticized my people. Wow, what's that trigger? And then feeling that, oh, I'm different, I'm left out. And truly owning a little bit more about what are those core fears that need some nurturing love. I think we're all having to do a big reparenting job. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thread that keeps coming through as you're speaking, you started us off by saying, let's have some compassion, some self-compassion and some empathy.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to that space and then we visualize the child saying, Mama, and crying and, oh God, they're in my way. I'm too busy. I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
What that's telling us is that, I can't speak up. I can't I have to, with retreat, I have to swallow it down. I'm in the way. I think that also interweaves with our sense of purpose. What am I even doing here? I'm a problem.
That's right. And we treat ourselves that way. We treat ourselves like, if you're in pain, there's something wrong with you.
You're broken and you're in this category. And I think, especially in this community, Susan, I'm thinking about this community and how many of us, this is a self-help club. This is a choir of people that are on board and want to read the books and do the work. But it's interesting because it's so expansive.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot going on. We have the group of us that can be within this conversation, and then the petals keep going, and the levels of unconsciousness that go outward. Like you were saying earlier, it's such a big issue going on right now, and this virus is one small thread of what's happening. The writing on the wall. We see what's happening with the earth and the planet and the environment. But what I really appreciate about you bringing in the empathy and the compassion, and then taking us back to look at ourselves when we are young, and that relationship, how do we parent ourselves? Because, when I think about us finding our strength and finding that fierce nature of camaraderie and saying, I can do something, I'm a part of this, I have a purpose, because we're told so young, if we're in the way, you're a problem. I think that really, I believe that we come in with a purpose to be a part of something greater than ourselves, but I think we become disconnected. That division happens, and we lose our worthiness to participate.
Right. We have to, when I say a reparenting job, I'm really seeing us as, while we're reparenting, we're going, oh, I see that part of myself that I was rejecting, the needy part. Does that sound familiar to some of us? Or the part that's angry. I was rejecting that part. I'm saying I should never feel certain, strong emotions. Somehow, if we get to know each of these parts and bring them into the wholeness that I am, that is a whole-making process that brings me back into the present moment. It really does, because if one of these parts is rejected, I'm pulled somewhere to defend that part, or to or to hide from that part. Whereas the more I learn to own all the different shadow pieces, I'm becoming whole. I'm becoming more fully just all there. That's kind of a vague way of saying present. It's a big term though, and I'm becoming confident and understanding of the bigger life process of whole making. That means us individual egos becoming less identified with that ego part that needs protection and more joining the whole, which gives you tremendous inner power and resourcefulness. And even a good cry. I saw this with another client this morning. Even a good cry. And then feeling all the different aspects of the hurts that she's been running away from by being cold and, I'll just cut that person out of my life. She began to bring in how the people who were important to her were important rather than cutting them out. Feeling the pain, and all of a sudden, she feels more whole. And I imagine other people have experienced this. And when you feel more whole, you are more able to affect your world. Or at least you feel the confidence that you can. And maybe that's what I'm shooting for, is each of us just taking what we see as right in front of us and having the courage to take one step at a time, whatever that may be. So part of this addiction to control that I mentioned, which I haven't addressed yet, that's one of the other, I think it's a block in being able to learn from experience, because if we can't experience our experience. So one of the big things that we're having to experience now is kind of an unknown. I don't know where this is going. How many people are afraid to make plans too far in advance? So we're now having to confront the need to know the outcome, and we don't know the outcome. So when I dial all that back to how does an individual create personal practices to tackle your need to know when you can't possibly know something? How can you learn to be more comfortable being on the edge? My practice, and I do these workshops called honesty salons and getting real workshops. And one of the best practices for learning how to step into the unknown and get more confident that you can handle whatever happens is honest communication. And of course I teach skills that help people be honest in a responsible way, but it's still a risk. You still have to say, I want to have a second date with you, and then wait until what the other person's going to say. That's that fear of the unknown on a very personal level. And we have those going on every day in our personal lives. So our personal lives are wonderful laboratories for practice. And I think we just all have to get used to life is a practice. Because otherwise, we're not going to be disciplined enough to, I'm going to say we have to sort of nudge ourselves to do some of the uncomfortable work, like the uncomfortable work of notice I'm triggered, pause and stop accusing my partner or telling my partner what she did wrong, pause and feel my feelings, bring some tenderness to that, come back after I've done that and talk to my partner about my real vulnerable needs, like my need to feel that my needs matter to you or that my voice matters. Simple practices that interrupt the automatic avoidance of the personality, the pain avoidance, that interrupt the excessive need for control by over talking. So you say, I hope, I'd like a second date with you, but you probably don't want that because, I'm not as good looking as your last boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. And it's okay to say no, all of those I call control patterns, and being more self-aware of all these automatic behaviors that are designed to kind of like either control the outcome of your communication, either get her to say what you want her to say, or get yourself so you don't hurt so much if the answer's no. So I think people being aware of their automatic triggers and their control patterns those are two of the best practices I know, and they can be practiced anywhere, whether it's a collective crisis or you're cooped up with somebody that you can't stand.
Yeah, because we don't have control right now. Like you're saying, this is a time
lot less control.
Control. And I keep getting this image, Susan, of division. And to me, truth is, it is the wholeness is truth that brings us back together as one. I think when we dealt with trauma, or we've been told unconsciously by a parent that that didn't have enough time for us, when we needed oneness, we were pushed into the division.
Mm-hmm.
When we point our fingers, that's encouraging the division. It's saying we're too separate. And here we are in a unique time where we are literally divided into our separate worlds, orbs, cells. Everyone is divided, quarantined. So it's bringing up a lot of the division pain of feeling divided and feeling alone and separated. So I love the work that you're doing. I love you bringing us back around and continually bringing us back to the truth. Because to me, truth is the wholeness. That is the oneness. It brings us where we're divided and we're in denial, and like you say, we're avoiding. If you stop avoiding and you look in the same direction as that which you're avoiding, suddenly there's a coming together. I'm curious for you where you see applicable ways of dealing with that sense of division and feeling a sense of connection when we are physically divided away from one another. I guess this would be an opportunity to look at all of the truth in our lives, of the pain, and stop turning away from it, because wouldn't you say that would just kind of blossom a sense of oneness?
Well, I think it's better to start with, what am I experiencing in this, what a lot of people might say is a time of isolation, aloneness. Not everybody's experiencing the same thing. So first of all, I don't want to make a lot of generalizations about what people are experiencing. I do want to make a big statement that we collectively are actually, whether you see it this way or not, we collectively are dealing with a collective crisis. And for me, the hopeful thought there is maybe this time, maybe the ecological crisis didn't hit people in a personal enough way, but this, I might get sick and die, maybe that's going to wake us up a little more to the fact that there's a question here, which I like. It's, how are we doing? And so I ask that, and I try to ask that no matter whether it's this phase of humanity or 20 years ago. I mean, we had stuff going on all the time. So you're talking about the divisions. So first of all, I'd like to ask anyone listening here is, what are the divisions? That's a general word, but that is a theme right now, feeling isolated, feeling like you can't go certain places and can't see people. But I think probably the more tangible division for me does come when I'm sitting at my computer or reading the different kinds of news and feeling the pain of the finger pointing that's going on. It's that kind of division that causes me personally pain. I'm not trying to sell that and say that's the only type of pain, but I really want people to look for the pain, look for where it hurts you, because to change, the root of change is the ability to notice something's off here. Something needs to change. Maybe it's just in how I'm using my time or how I'm framing the problem. I don't know what needs to change, but you need to start with, the ability to even notice that you're off balance, in some kind of pain or distress. So I would say start there. And if the word division or isolation rings a bell for you, then feel into what that means to you. And like for me, I said what that means for me is two warring, no, it could be more than two, but let's say two warring points of view, two humans. I'm a marriage counselor, so I'm going into a line of work to heal those kind of divisions, the man-woman, or the person who is always wanting to talk and make up fast versus the person who needs more space. Both views need to be heard, and somehow, and this is the we thing that heals divisions, and you can do this on Zoom, you can do this through email, you don't have to wait until the isolation, physical isolation, is lifted. It's like, this is a we problem. So if I've got a couple in my office and she wants to make up quickly or keep talking, and no, don't pause, and the other person, and often that's the man, she wants to keep talking, he wants to go to his office and calm down. It's not like you're going to change either one of those people. This is a normal human difference, and they're going to be, this analogy can be spread to the whole culture. So it's like you and I, partners in marriage, we have a problem. Our problem is our differences. Our problem is that I want you to change so I can feel better. All right, that ain't gonna work. So how do we tackle this as, look, our differences, it's not so much the differences, it's the meaning we make of the differences. Like, he doesn't care about me anymore, he's leaving, or, oh, she's always finding fault with me, can't she appreciate what I do? Oh, these are the meanings that get made by human partners in love. And if you look at the political scene, you're going to see a lot of the same stuff. I read newsletters from, let's say, the other party to try to understand what their pains are and what their point of view is. And they've had different life experiences than I have. And I do try to inquire, where did those fears, like my sister-in-law is a teacher in the South, where did those fears of integration in schools come from in you? Okay, she's in Tennessee. I grew up in New York. No, I didn't see all this. She saw busing up close and personal. She saw integration in the classroom. I'm trying to understand other people's realities that way, because I think that the whole issue is whole making, so that each of us can rejoin the whole. And like you suggested, Katie, it's like, that's an empowering thing. That brings me to a more confident place in my being. I am aligned. The way I like to say it is with the laws of life. Because life is, and development is, it's a process of integration of parts into wholes, larger and larger wholes. And that's science. I love the way scientists talk about differentiation and integration in biology. And it's the same in systems thinking, and it's the same in spiritual practice and spiritual thought.
You're right. As you're sharing, I see I feel like that's probably where, for the decades that you've been doing this, is bringing into oneness. That's a spiritual practice of non-duality, duality into non-duality, to take two parts, and it's math as well. It's how do we calculate, bring together this number. And I think of all of your work in relationship counseling, this being your craft, your ability, your gift. And I think about that within ourselves, the feeling of division, of separation, of feeling dismantled, as, tying into us talking about where do we find that confidence and that sense of purpose when we've been trained for so long to feel divided within, to feel like our emotions are a separate thing, that like there's no space for our emotions, just the way that maybe I keep going back to the example you gave at the beginning of a parent saying, I don't have time. I've got, like, here's a pacifier, distract yourself. I can't handle you right now. You're not important enough for me. Not that that's what they're saying, but the child might be absorbing that.
Yes.
And then within us, we say, I don't have time to deal with my fear. It's not important enough. My emotions, my need to cry is not important enough. I need to keep working. My parents kept working. I have to keep working. And I guess all these amazing tools you're offering us, essentially, we're bringing the divided pieces within us together. And again, that essence of truth, saying, if you can look at where you're afraid, you're giving us these beautiful encouragement to walk on this path of look at what you're afraid of, look at that pain, be with the pain, bring in the truth.
And really look more deeply. So we have to have time for whatever wants to bubble up. If mommy didn't have time because she had 4 other kids, I'm used to treating myself that same way, which is, oh, nobody wants to hear what you've got to say. You're just one of 4. You're just another mouth. But if I'm now using my relationship to the world as my practice, and using my trigger reactions to the world as my practice, I'm really encouraging everyone to take it all on as, like, whatever reaction you're having to the world. Like for me, it's 2 polarized factions pointing the finger and, going to war. The things that we notice and that bug us about the environment usually are mirrored inside of ourselves. I often say the outer struggle mirrors the inner struggle. So if I'm in a relationship where one of us wants a lot of togetherness and the other one wants a lot of freedom and autonomy, actually, yeah, I can fight that relationship with my husband, but I realize in me there's a similar battle going on. Can I be myself while being close? That type of a battle. And so every time you look out there, it's a big, some of you don't know what the Rorschach is, but Rorschach is a projective test of ink blots. And, I might see in the ink blot, there's 2 people who hate each other. You project onto whatever's going on out there something that needs to be handled within yourself. So we already are whole, in a sense. The world already is mirroring our inner world in some way. Nature really wants us to heal. It gives us so many tools and cues, but we do need to have a little more time for the pain. You heard that song, I haven't got time for the pain. Oh, we really do need to slow down enough and just frequently check in and go, how am I doing? And how are we doing, all my different parts? Are they getting along with each other? Oh, and do I have my good mother archetype activated? Because in these times, I think that is the archetype that's most needed, which is the part of myself that can just hold a big, loving space for whatever is, so that I can see it and learn what is called for here from me. And that takes time, giving yourself time.
Wow, how remarkable that we have time. Many of us, not everyone.
Yeah.
Been gifted this time. I say gifted because the thing is, a lot of times this work we're not allowing ourselves the opening or the opportunity because of time. And suddenly we have to we have to look at what we've been putting off for so long, because now we have time.
Yeah.
So what an opportunity to take this time and say, okay,
Yeah.
pain, fear, let's do this. I've been avoiding you. Now I've got time. I can't use that as an excuse anymore. I have to be with it. And it, like you're saying earlier too about the control, I love the tips and tools you're giving us, because we also don't have control right now. So, I mean, we do and we don't, but this is, we can't control our external world. And so it's giving us this opportunity to look into the internal world, and we, held in a basket of time and space to do this inner work, to look at the pain, to look at the truth, to welcome the opportunity to not avoid anymore.
You know what a lot of people find when they really pause, when they ask the question, what am I avoiding? And they really pause and go, feel all the way down, is there's grief down there. I'm surprised to discover this. It's not like some theory that I had where I read it in a book. I see this every day. It's like, oh, grief for my inability to be there for myself earlier in my life, or grief for the fact that that little me, age 5 years old, did not get encouraged to self-express. What a different person I would have been if I'd had more parental support. And it's okay to feel sorrow for yourself, and then to drop that down another level to just, hey, it's what is. It's what grief has to do with, a kind of sorrow about something that just is. Might be a death, but it, by now, it happened, and now it just is. Or any kind of loss. So I think that the whole process of discovery of what's in this human life as kind of a laboratory for what is in life, to be felt, to be experienced. Maybe the people I work with, it's like an exciting journey. We love to notice our little control patterns and our little automatic smiling and nodding when we don't really mean that, or our little self-effacing preambles and all that. People, it's fun to mind your shadow. You just have to have the practice mindset, which I think a lot of our audience already has that mindset, but just think of your whole life as a practice.
And I see that absolutely. This is because then you don't feel this burden of potential failure. You're like, I'm just practicing. Life is a practice. But I know our time is narrowing down. I want to say that this beautiful image came while you're speaking, and to go into the root of what's going on, to see this. You often refer to our childhood and our needs not being met, and so I see this. Like you said, there's grief in the center a lot of times. And it's true that when you go in, there's a deep sadness. I mean, life is bittersweet. You're born, and then you will experience deaths, and then you'll have to die, and you'll have to say goodbye to everything you've ever loved. And there's grief, undeniably. And then I love this too, of then bringing in the maternal, the archetype of the Divine Mother. And I feel like maybe, would you say that that's kind of the wholeness, if we're talking about division and connectedness, of taking that, of allowing ourselves permission to feel the grief, and then bringing in the Divine Mother that can hold ourselves in that state of grief. Like you'd spoken about, if we're going to bring in an archetype, let's bring her in. And what a being to meet that grief, and to be able to have the capacity to hold the crying child, to have the strength in the arms and strength in the heart, to not be intimidated or to turn away from grief, but to bring the grief in and then to transmute that into love and safety.
And once the good mother has been able to hold the grief, something grows out of grief. I'm thinking of the stage that humanity may be at in its own life cycle. I mean, maybe we are looking down toward the latter phases of human life on Earth. I don't know. But I know I'm looking at the latter phases of my life on earth. So, of course, I'm projecting that outward. And I'm having a good time with that. I'm feeling okay when I can feel some grief for what's unfinished, for the mistakes that I might have made, the karma I might have created. How about us as humans? I really do think that having a good inner maternal Blessed Mary, there's all kinds of themes the last 20, 30 years in the culture about bringing in the feminine sacred. I think once I can feel the grief and see that it's actually about some things, I'm somehow empowered to take care of those things that I still have time to take care of in my life. It's not like grief is the end. Grief liberates the energy that was bound up trying to not see that, gee, I made some boo-boos. In humanity, we made some boo-boos back there. We made some wrong turns, and there's still time to correct some of those.
Oh, I love that, Susan. Grief is the power, the wind power that we can lift our sails into giving ourselves motivation to live in presence and gratitude that this too will pass. We will die at some point. So if we can come to terms with that as well, then we can live in this presence and allow ourselves to be present, because we know that we've looked at the reality of it drawing near, and we give ourselves permission to be here right now. This has been so beautiful, and I feel like we could go for 2 hours, because I feel like there's so much so many different little areas and little pieces that I feel like we could go further down. We are coming to the close of our beautiful interview, but I'm curious if you've given us amazing tools and new perspectives, and I'm curious if you want to leave us off with, it could be a question, it could be an intention, but something to, you're bringing us to our hearts. So I would say something to rest inside of our hearts. If there was something that you would like to just put a little sprinkle dust into each person's heart that's in our circle right now watching this, what would you say?
I would say get in the habit, make it a practice to frequently pause and just check in with your present felt experience. That's what we're being given now, some of us. Like, instead of cleaning out your closets, just take a minute and go, I've been given this time to just be with whatever's coming up in me. And it's a kind of meditation, but it's a conscious pausing simply to see what am I neglecting here? What part of me am I avoiding? Is there any little feeling that if I didn't pause, I would not notice it? And the same thing as we go out into the world with people. If I pause, there's some part of reality maybe that I don't want to experience my discomfort around, and just relax into allowing that to be there and being curious about it and seeing where it takes you.
Being curious, being open, and just allowing ourselves to witness.
Trust nature. Nature guides us if you just relax and pay attention to where your attention is drawn.
Susan Campbell, you are so amazing. Thank you. I'm giving you a big hug right now.
Back to you, Katie, and to all of our listeners here. What a great community we're part of.
So beautiful. And if for all of you that have probably had similar ideas of, wow, where can I learn more about her? And she's for relationship counseling, and the good news is Susan has 11 books, like I mentioned earlier, so you can learn more of her amazing insights and her years of study and analyzing the human behavior and the human experience and her work online, or attend one of your workshops and one of your talks. Again, thank you so much for joining us. On behalf of the SAND community, thank you. And we look forward to getting to spend time with you again. Thank you.
See you at the other side.
The other side.